Let me move this a little bit. And I'm just going to have to make this work as we go here. This is very hard to do behind your back. All right. So Craig's charts. We'll walk our way through them a bit, and we'll do some of this next week too. You're going to read Little John chapters 1 and 2. If you want to get ahead in Craig, go ahead. And if you want to, because some of the Craig readings will get harder later, again. But we'll also go over this again and a couple times so that it becomes for you a touchstone you can go back to and use it to make sense of what's going on. All right, now, he's going to have these columns, okay, that communication is theorized as. So the problems of communication are different for each thing. So we've already gone over this, really. But if you ask, what is the problem? You ask a rhetorician, there's a communication problem. What's the problem? A rhetorician will say there's a social situation that requires people to deliberate together and make a decision. That's what a rhetorician is interested in. So historically, for the Athens and Sparta, it was, do we build a bridge? Do we build the wall of the city? Do we go to war? Do we not go to war? We have to decide. And we're creating some kind of a democracy, a primitive democracy. So we don't just ask the king what we should do. We talk to each other. And so for a rhetorical person, there's a social situation or urgency requiring people to come together and make a decision. Where in our world today do we see social issues, problems that require people to get together, talk about courses of action in which there's no clear decision, and then make a choice? Okay, a lot of our political world. Should we get out of Iraq or shouldn't we get out of Iraq? You know, it's not like a biological question that says, is this a duck or is this a chicken? You know, and you can figure it out just by looking at it. These are things that have no factual answer to them. They are matters of public deliberation. And so a rhetorician is interested in how do we debate this? How do we argue it? A rhetorician tries to be skilled at both sides of the argument. A rhetorician says, what are the arguments that can be made for, and what are the arguments that can be made against? And what are the available resources to argue in each case? And then I construct my argument.
It sounds very similar to what a lawyer would do.
Yes.
Look at both sides and see what their strongest arguments would be for
exactly.
and against.
Yes. So there are three kinds of rhetoric, actually. There's forensic rhetoric, which is legal rhetoric. There's the political rhetoric, which is public matters. And then there is epidictic rhetoric, which is ceremonial rhetoric. You know, honors, awards, dedications, funerals, things like this. So when they studied it in in Aristotle's time, they thought of it that way. So yeah, by all means, it really comes out of a legal tradition where the Athenians were dealing with claims to property. You had a situation where one group of people had been in power, and then they got taken out of power, so other people claimed people's lands, and then the other people got back in power. So who does the land belong to? You know, well, there's no clear answer. You know, is it the ones who were there first, or is it the ones who developed the land, or what are we going to do? So they required each person to speak on their own behalf before the counsel to make their argument. So me being a farmer, I went to Jeff, who's a public speech teacher, and I said, teach me how to make the best argument for my presentation in court. And so that's where the sophists came in. And they would teach you how to present your case. Yeah, so good connection there. Where else do we see this issue? So we see this issue in Iraq question. We see this in the legal system.
I was going to say, like, in schools and communities, like, when something happens in a school, like, and I guess it also kind of goes into critical too, but even though, like, the school administrators have kind of like the final say, they say something and the parents don't agree with it, you know, they storm the PTA meeting,
right,
and they sit there and debate it, and usually have parents on all different sides.
Yeah, so community school issues is a very good place where this kind of thing, town meetings, very rhetorical situations.
Does it extend out to like UN, or at that point
Yeah.
does it start to become too
No, it does.
political?
No, it does. Well, rhetoric is very much at home in the political world.
Right.
Yeah, so, because that's the world that exists.
I have a question about the ceremonial. Like, is rhetoric, and this is kind of where I get confused, is it more just like speaking, or is it persuading? Like, because if you're like ceremonial, if, I guess, maybe what I have in my mind is like, you know, like at 9/11, you give like a speech, or
Right.
that would be like ceremonial, or like honoring someone for a job well done.
Right.
Is it, you know, like convincing them that they did a job well done, or is it just expressing, you know, like honor towards?
Well, it's creating a view of to praise this person or to commend them.
Intended audience be, like, let's say we were giving you an award, would the intended audience be like more write the speech for that person, or would it be for everyone there watching you get the award?
It'd be for everyone there watching the award. If I was given an award to somebody, I just did this weekend, you know, I do a lot of ceremonial speaking, and I had to give an award to someone who helped build a building, you know, and there was a lot of tensions, and there had been fights, and there had been issues going on, and how do you manage all the people who are feeling angry, and but then all the people who contributed and all the people who worked. You have all of these things to balance in making the presentation. So yeah, so it's a very much awareness of who am I speaking to, and what is the rhetorical requirement, what is the goal. And the goal in this case is to close out that time and move forward into the future. So, you know, yeah, it's very much structured around concerns about that. Yeah. Always has the public in mind. Rhetoric always has the public in mind. Yeah. So then what he does in his chart is he goes down and says, well, rhetoric thinks about communication as the practical art of talking, of discourse. Problems of communication are about a social situation that requires people to get together and make a judgment about something that is not at all clear what should be done. And they use language like this. They talk about it as an art, a method, the communicator, the audience, the strategy, the commonplaces, the typical things we talk about. You know, it's better that this should happen than that should happen. Logic, emotion, pathos, ethos, logos. It has a language. So if you were going to, let's say you went to a funeral, or you went to a ceremonial dedication this week, you could take this language and begin to do analysis of what happened, and that would be an application. And so, okay, I saw a communicator addressing an audience, having a particular purpose in view, having certain things that had to be dealt with, dealing with logic, and then there was emotion, and there was credibility, there was praise of character. That would be the things you would talk about in a rhetorical situation. So I'm just trying to show you how to use Craig's chart and find my cursor at the same time. There you go. right, so he's got language, and he says, now this particular tradition is, people recognize it as having value because they realize words have power. It's a commonplace. Words are powerful. You know, the pen is mightier than the sword. We don't have a problem with this. That we should be informed before we make decisions. That we can get better if we practice speaking or if we think about it. So he says, Craig says, this is plausible. Rhetorical truth is plausible when it appeals to commonplaces such as these. So each theory, tradition will have things that everyone, would agree to about communication. So that gives it a base to work with people from. But he says it's interesting when it challenges commonplaces such as this. When someone might say to you, well, you know, words are not actions. Actions speak louder than words. A rhetorical person would say, let's think about that again. Words are action, and words can create huge actions. So a rhetorical person says, this is a commonplace for you, but I want to challenge that. You think it's mere words. No. It's not mere words. Words are incredibly powerful. So I challenge it. Appearance is not reality. That's a commonplace people would say. You know, the appearance is not the reality. A rhetorician would say, perception is reality. What people think about you and believe about you becomes their functional reality. And so in the worst case, we put up appearances that are deceptive. In the best case, we put up appearances that build the best case for our situation. So Craig, in this box, is going to say things that we think are pretty much the case, but these traditions challenge it. And so you should think twice about this. I don't agree with you. So, style is not substance. Well, a rhetorician would say style makes a huge difference in the way words are put together. Opinion is not truth. You know, a lot of rhetoric is built around the idea that, now Aristotle didn't agree with this, but the sophists were accused of this, saying that whatever we can make people believe becomes the truth. Now, Socrates and Aristotle got their backs up about that. And they said that's a very poor use of language to deceive and to make what is not true, true. So they were involved in a big argument about the virtuous orator. A good man speaking well. Sorry, man, a good human being speaking well, you know. But that was Cicero and them. So there was a big argument within the rhetorical tradition about truth. But there were rhetoricians who said, truth doesn't matter at all. What matters is what I can convince people of. Go back to your legal tradition, you know. This is what we accuse lawyers of. Lawyers say if you want justice, go over to the theology department. What we deal with here is the law. So any quick thoughts about that? Are you understanding how to read Craig's chart better? This may be, you may already have figured this out, but I want to go through it with you so that this is easy for you to do. So going down, he's going to say then, all right, now let's get the rhetorical tradition and let's have it be in dialectical tension with another tradition. Let's have it kind of get in the ring and punch it out with the other thing. So he says, here's where rhetoric gets into an argument with itself even about the question of learning and theory. You know, is it a practice or is it a theoretical? Is it a techne or is it a theoretical knowledge, a theoria? You know, is it just rules for speaking, or is it understanding people and explaining what's going on? So that within rhetoric, there's an argument about that. And there are people who teach public speaking by rules. Do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And there are other people who say, no, you should learn the theories, the explanations of what's going on. So then you get a rhetorician in the ring with a semiotician. And the rhetorician says against semiotics. This is a little hard to figure out. So the rhetorician punches the semiotician and says, you use signs, but that use of signs is rhetorical. It is for persuasion, it is to an audience, it's embedded in a strategy by a communicator. So you think all you're doing is signs, but I see you doing rhetoric. So the rhetorician says to the semiotician, you don't realize all that's involved in your use of signs. Now later on, the semiotician will say something against the rhetorician. Semiotician will punch back against rhetoric and say, we don't use signs, rather they use us. So you rhetoricians think you're using signs rhetorically. Guess what? The whole way that sign has been developed structures the way you can use it. So it's really structuring you. It's already structured what you can do with it. It's not you using it, it's using you. So a semiotician says the meaning is further back than the use of it. So they punch at each other. They tense their intention with each other. This is hard to read. You have to think, I mean, for me the boxing image works, you know, where one is getting the other. So a phenomenologist gets in the ring and punches the rhetorician and says, here's my criticism of you, rhetorician. This is where I challenge you. That if you're doing your rhetoric thing, you are inauthentic. You're not being real. You're not revealing the true self in dialogue with another person. You're being manipulative and deceitful. So I accuse you of being inauthentic. The rhetorician is like, what's authenticity? What's truth? You know? But the phenomenologist says that's what's important, is encountering truthfully the other person. So they're not going to work together too well there. A rhetorician says against the phenomenologist, authenticity is a dangerous myth. Good communication must be artful and strategic. So if you think you can run society by everyone just being honest with each other, guess what? It's not going to work. And there's been a whole bunch of arguments about this, about the authenticity movement and society and individualism. Can you have a society where everybody is just being who they are? And so I have to be what I am. And I have to be what I am. And I have to be what I am. So you have this whole society of individuals unfolding their authenticity. Can you have a community? Can I give up some of myself for the sake of living together with others? So there's a whole argument about the authenticity movement and whether it makes it possible to live in community or not. Phenomenologist says there's no other way to do it. Rhetorician says it's not going to work. So, anyone want to connect that to modernism, postmodernism, post-postmodernism? No? Okay. All right, do we need a breather here? Any questions or thoughts? I'm pushing you hard on this. Okay, I'm trying to walk you through it and stretch your mind with it. Does anybody see anything that's annoying to them, confusing, frustrating?
When you were saying that the meaning already exists and it's using you.
Yes, that's what a semiotic person would say.
Can you think of an example? I can never. I read that and I couldn't get my brain around it, and I still can't get my brain around it.
The signs use us.
If I may, I have a question. I really had a question related to what you were saying. From what I've read with the semiotics, there's a really concentrated dispute around what was first. So are the signs the ones that determine their, for example, if you have this pen, okay, you call it pen, so is it the object that calls the name, or have we named it? So from what you were saying there, it seems like the dispute ends here, that first there was the object that determined its sign, so its symbol. But then again, there's the other side of the dispute that says that we name the things according to our perception and our perception.
Our interests in the things,
exactly.
Yeah.
I was just thinking of an example as to in our, I think it was our intro book, it was a picture of some tragedy that happened, and then I think there was a baby or a child.
The Aber
being a sign
coal mine.
for
Yeah, I used that just
happened.
recently.
It wasn't necessarily because it was intended to be a sign, but
Yeah.
because it came out as being a sign of kind of like humanitarian and emotional issues with that one particular incident. So I think that was kind of illustrating that we don't use signs. It wasn't used as a sign, but it instead became a sign.
It kind of got away. It took on a life of its own.
Exactly.
Yeah, here's the
signs are just
Aber.
just like we said before. I mean, it depends on the context. On the context, the sign is within. I mean, for example, I may not interpret the same sign as you would because we have totally different context.
Right.
Like that. This is how they made. I'm sorry. Excuse me. What was the name of the universal language that it's right here?
Esperanto.
Esperanto. I mean, that didn't work exactly because we have different perspectives on the world, and we use different languages for the same thing. So.
Yeah, here's an example. This is the one Melissa's talking about, the Aberfan disaster. This was a situation where a mining town in England, they had been mining coal and putting the slag scrap into a mountain, and it rained, and the slag heaps ran down into the town and crushed a school and killed a bunch of children. And so there was a photograph. Maybe it's in here on this link. I'll just try this once. So yeah, where a man took a picture of people trying to dig out others, and it was. If I had time, I'd find the picture for you. But and then an editor in the newsroom cropped the picture to zero in on a policeman carrying a girl and a mother walking alongside him. Now, if you see the picture in the original, it's just part of this huge thing where there's all kinds of people and all. But once that symbol was created, it became an iconic thing that spoke about the response of the British police force to this. And so, in that sense, that symbol, a rhetorician would say that's a highly rhetorical symbol. And a semiotician, I think, in that case is going to say that symbol, we didn't create it, but it's using us. It's pulling us into its scheme. So.
Maybe, like, and I could be wrong, but to help explain it, kind of like the opposite of what PR is. Like, PR, you try to specifically pick, like, you pick your words very carefully, you pick your images very carefully, and you try to, like, focus it in using specific things. But, like, what the argument would be is you can't do it, would be the opposite of what it is.
Semioticians get a little complicated, you know. I mean, it's. Let me see if they have that image here.
It almost reminds me too. Maybe this is something that everybody can kind of remember from. Oh gosh, there was a news event. I forget which tragedy it was, like 10 years ago, where the fireman was holding the baby with the daycare center
That might have been the Oklahoma City.
yeah, Oklahoma City bombing, and that
Right.
was on like the covers of Time, and you know, a bunch of magazines, I think, kind of used it as a symbol for the event and
Right.
the workers there. You know, granted, that was a picture of a lot of things that were happening on that day, but everybody chose to focus
Yeah, the
in
symbol.
on that one symbol of what happened.
Foucault, in this regard, said it this way. Some of the extreme semioticians say that subjects don't exist at all. That there is no you. What there is a lot of language that is speaking itself through you. And so that language already exists, the priorities and the thoughts of that language already exist, and you're just a node in a linguistic web. And you don't have an original thought, and you don't even exist. You just have come to consciousness as part of this language, and language is speaking you. That's the way the extreme people would put it. That'll ruin your day. You know? Try that with the police. It wasn't me. It was language speaking through me. You know. Yeah. Okay, buddy. We got you. You know. So, no, Foucault said so. So, yeah, I can see that. So, yeah, so rhetoricians would say against the cybernetics, you can't reduce it to formal calculation. Now, that is some of the more formal cybernetic approaches that try to quantify the exchange of information. So I would want to have a long talk with Craig about his view of cybernetics at some point. A rhetorician against sociopsychology, you can't predict people because there's situations. It's not just about people's traits. And he would say against sociocultural theory, all of the things you're talking about, beliefs, attitudes, and values, are resources for rhetorical discourse. So the rhetorician uses all those things. You just describe them, we use them. And so someone asked me, I don't know if it's this class, whether all theories are descriptive, explanatory, predictive, and transformative. And I say, no, some theories are just descriptive and explanatory. They just tell you things about stuff. But critical theories and rhetoric are normative in that they tell you how it should be. They don't just tell you what is, they tell you what should be. So they have a... And then against critical theory, they say you've got to be in the particular setting. You can't make a universal principle about a huge ideological thing going on. You've got to stay in the particular context, what's going on. So, I mean, if you can do this, it is worth your time to fight your brain through this matrix and to struggle to figure out what is this box saying and why does that make sense. It's a struggle. But it's a worthwhile struggle.
It's kind of hard too, because like some of the things like you don't agree with them.
Yeah.
Like I think, I don't know, maybe for me that when he like brought up, I kind of don't agree with it at all. The against rhetoric from the semiotic.
Right.
Like to understand it's one thing, but then like to try to understand where they're coming from when you disagree with it.
Yeah.
Is,
well, part of this is entering the field and understanding how people within the field address things. And as we read primary sources, you'll get more of a grip on what the semiotic perspective is about and what the... But again, in the end of the day, it all needs to come back to some problem in your context. Some communication problem you're dealing with where we need to bring